This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
Joining us today is Dina Denham Smith. Dina is a seasoned leader and executive coach with 25-year proven track record of helping people and teams excel. Leveraging her executive experience and expertise in organizational psychology, Dina coaches senior leaders and teams at world-leading brands such as Adobe, Netflix, PwC, Gap, Gilead, Dropbox, Stripe, and numerous high-growth companies. Dina has written over 60 articles on leadership and career success for publications like the Harvard Business Review and is frequently featured in international media outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, Newsweek, and the BBC. And we're excited to announce that Dina Denham Smith is the co-author of an upcoming book, Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. And it's releasing February 18th. We will keep you posted. As an expert at the intersection of psychology and business, Dina shares valuable insights on leadership in today's emotionally demanding workplace.
One of the key points that I recall from our conversation with Dina was how leaders need to balance both objectivity and empathy, something that she calls compassionate detachment. And I think not only was that profound and timely in what our leaders need today, but she also has techniques for how to create that balance.
Dina made it clear that human beings must take strategic pit stops, but we don't give ourselves permission. Thus, we are seeing burnout becoming a World Health Organization official designation. But she doesn't just point out the problem, she gives us a strategy to put pit stops into our leadership days, weeks, and years. I know you'll enjoy this conversation and benefit from it like we did. Welcome, Dina Denham Smith.
Welcome, Dina, to a Leadership Beyond podcast. We're so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah. We love to bring in people who share our passion for making the world a better place to work with a focus on people. And that's exactly what you're all about in everything that you've done leading up to now, really focusing on we dare to say the softer skills of leadership because they're not easy, right? But they're maybe not what you're getting in your MBA program. So, this is sort of where we're focused and you're focused. So to open up, just tell us a little bit about your journey and why this is also important to you.
And before I even get into that, I think soft skills needs a rebrand. Like it
Yeah.
should be essential skills, right? Like
because
there is
critical skills. I like that.
There is nothing soft about it. It's actually what drives like hard like numbers that most people think about, from the C-level to the shareholders. But I won't get quite on that soapbox yet. So my journey to the focus of my work today and what is actually a through line in my career, honestly, it started I had a near-death experience in college, and what I realized is life is really short. All the moments matter, and it wasn't too long after that, this occurred my senior year in college, that I was working, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a huge amount of time in our lives. Like how we spend our work and the quality of our work lives matters so much. And there's so much opportunity here to make the most of this for ourselves, as well as the other people around us. And so really marrying those two experiences, I became just uber focused on work and how we can make it successful for the people in it and the businesses. And I've always had a scientific bent. So it sort of quickly led me in the direction of industrial organizational psychology. I was in a PhD program. I actually left after my master's because it felt like it was really preparing me to be an academic. And I was like, what I
Mm,
really want to do is get the science out of here into the workplace where it can help people. So I paired that with my MBA because I knew I would need to make a strong business case to
yeah.
CFOs. This was like the 90s. It truly was soft skill
Hmm.
back then. And so I kind of married those two degrees. And then I've just always worked at this intersection of what I consider like psychology and business. And I think about this double bottom line for people and then ultimately for businesses.
Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant. But, aligning, we talk a lot about aligning the business strategy with the people strategy, because how do you do one without the other?
Yeah. Yeah. You largely cannot.
Right. I mean, it still takes people. Yeah, I know we've got AI and we've got all the technologies to help us, but it's still, at the end of the day, somewhere in there, it takes people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm avoiding going on my soapbox about
Soapbox.
the word soft skills. And originally it just meant it was difficult to measure. And now
Hmm.
we can get better at measuring it. But back then in the 90s, you could easily measure what happens when the people didn't have well-developed, quote, soft skills. So it was easy to measure when it was missing. And now
Yeah.
it's getting easier to measure when it's present.
Hmm.
Through measure a lot of different metrics, but I didn't want to get into that. I did want to ask you specifically about self-care and stress. We had a previous guest, Brian Sykes, who used athletics to say every athlete needs recovery time. And you
Hmm.
mentioned recovery specifically. And yet, corporate athletes often are expected to go, go, go and
Yeah.
never breathe. And so, talk a little bit about self-care and particularly how it relates to the stresses of the pace that we keep.
Yeah. It's recovery is fundamental to high performance. I think that's the that's the headline.
Mm.
And so self-care, uh, I think that, again, I don't like the term because I think it's oftentimes um, interpreted somehow to be soft or to be selfish. And
Or
it's
after hours is what I feel like, right? Like, yeah, you
yeah,
do that later.
So it has the same problem that the word soft skills have,
Yeah.
and yet people are familiar. So talk about what
mhm,
you do mean.
yeah,
And actually, people care is not just self, it starts with self, but it's all the people in the environment. So continue about
yeah. And I
recovery
think
is
self-care
essential.
also sounds like a bubble bath, right? And for some people, that is a perfectly wonderful way to care for themselves. For other people, it's not. So when I'm talking about recovery experiences in the book that I co-wrote with Dr. Alicia Grandy that's coming out next month, we actually
Tell us the
use
title while you're on that roll.
sure. It's called Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work.
Wonderful.
Um, but we use a metaphor of a high performance race car. So many leaders, they push themselves like a high performance race car, like one more lap, one more lap, one more lap. And they do this for a bunch of different reasons, right? Like there is a lot of sort of Western cultural influence, right, around high achievement. Our corporate cultures tend to support and encourage this. And then many leaders are, in their nature, they're driven to, they want to perform well, they want to achieve. So they keep pushing themselves. But the problem is, you know, all high performance race cars, right? Like they actually get a lot of care. That's how they go fast over time. And recovery experiences for leaders are akin to a race car taking a pit stop, right? If you're watching the Daytona 500 or Formula One or whatever these are, all these cars are stopping along the way, right? Because
Getting new tires.
right, they
Hmm.
need new wheels, they need new gas. Like What
You're not even
they
allowed to go to the bathroom, meeting to meeting to meeting. Yeah.
right,
A pit
right.
stop, they call it.
Pit stop, right. And so leaders truly need pit stops. I mean, we know the importance of like nutrition and sleep and eating and social connection. Those are so fundamental, and we know we should all do those things. And but we also need these shorter term recovery experiences that help us both recover from all of the stress of the day or the week or the month, as well as help us fuel up for what will be yet more intense experiences leading in today's world. And so, what we do know from the science is there are certain things that effectively enable recovery. And so, I prefer the word recovery over self care. Because that's effectively what we're trying to do is take high performance, and toggle between recovery so that we can maintain high performance for the long term. So you need to detach from work, right? So many of us, like, work is always on our minds, right? We're either worrying about something that's coming up or worrying about something that's already happened. So we need experiences that help us detach. We need experiences that we choose. Right? Control is such a fundamental human need. So someone saying, we're going on a hike this weekend, well, that may not be your good, your idea of a recovery experience. So it's important to have autonomy over what recovery looks like for you. It's important to have like slow down experiences that enable relaxation, and then engagement in hobbies or sports or something like that. That's another category of experiences that enable recovery. And some activities, just to give you an idea of how this works, can hit across all four categories. So other than, people first workplaces, and my other major passion is riding horses. And I can tell you that when I ride, which is I ride weekly, I compete, I am fully detached from work or I might die. All right. This is something I choose to do. It's in my blood. It is 100% coming from me. I find it deeply relaxing in a way that nothing else can. And it's really engaging. I'm getting great physical exercise. It's a lot of different things for me. And so that for me is like my silver bullet recovery experience. For other people, it's going to look like something entirely different or a collection of things. But if it helps you
But it will have
detach,
those components.
yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
can't say the solution is engage in horseback riding. That's not going to,
No,
and
you
it may
cannot.
transcend and include bubble baths and what,
Right, right,
but it
right.
isn't the thing you
Yeah,
do. It's the way that you show up detached from the constant grind.
yeah. And we actually have a framework in our book, and we call it DARE. It's detach, autonomy, relax, engage. And the reason we called it DARE, and I mean, its summary is just like oodles of research, is because it actually takes courage in our modern times to step back from the grind and
Yes.
take these breaks that are so important.
Yes. And so, and that's what I was thinking of as you were explaining that. A couple things. Autonomy really struck out for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because how can organizations ensure that they are encouraging this recovery time while not dictating what that looks like,
Yeah.
right? And like I know there's some companies that have at once a month wellness days. They're called wellness days, and it's a day to step back, but it might be the same day of the month for either a business line in the organization, parts of the organization. And for some employees, that doesn't work because you're client facing and you need to be on a client meeting or what. And it can't look like, let me take this meeting and then I'll go on my horseback ride,
Yeah.
right? So how can organizations kind of build an infrastructure to support DARE?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think part of it, and organizations, they mean the best with that wellness day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I've seen some of them pull it off more successfully than others. Um, but the tone really needs to start at the top.
Mhm.
Right, that it really does. When people see the CEO, the C-suite, the SVP and EVP layer all walking the talk, then they feel safe to actually do the same, right? To say, I'm taking a break. But when what is getting role modeled at the layer above them or multiple layers above them is a lot of talk about the importance of wellness, but not the demonstration of it, it's hard to actually go and do that yourself,
Yeah.
right? Actions always speak louder than words. And so it just, it, like most things, right, it starts at the top. And herein lies just one of the major great responsibilities of leadership, and why high quality leadership, like delivering that over time, it's super demanding. It's super demanding. And it's just it comes with great responsibility, great privilege sometimes, but the demands are really, really high.
So talk a little bit about, and I know you've written and talk about it, this thing called passing stress along. So we're not in recovery now. We're trying to make the workplace, and the on button is appropriate. And yet there's a disease called my stress is your stress is our stress, and a crisis, what do you call this? Everything is a fire. That game, whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah. So it's all building up. Talk a little bit about environments in which stress expands unnecessarily.
We could talk about this for a while. There's
There's too much of it.
there's a couple of different ways we could go with this, and I'll just choose one to begin with. The way I'm not going to choose is this whole notion of false urgency, um, which I did write about in HBR, because there are cultures of false urgency where there's no sort of distinction between what is truly urgent and what is the fire of the day. And it just
ASAP is just a universal. It doesn't matter if it's major or minor. So we won't go there. Tell us where we will.
Yeah, right. And that's a whole like force to reckon with in and of itself. But the other way that this shows up currently, especially for leaders, is the workplace has changed, and a lot of the forces were kind of simmering, and then I believe that the pandemic really like accelerated these changes in the workplace. But one of them really relates to the fact that employees do expect more supportive leaders, and they largely expect mentally healthy workplaces. And so the way that this now manifests for leaders is they have direct reports or colleagues coming to them, really sharing what are their personal struggles, right? It used to be that largely the only struggles that people would share with their leaders related to work or tasks. But now leaders are faced with supporting their team members sort of on things that are more in the personal realm. And that's all well and good. But it's actually shocking. There is some research that suggests that leaders today actually help employees more often with personal related struggles than work related struggles. And they have not they've not received the training nor the
They
resources
don't know how to do it. And so
Qualifications, right? That's a very
they don't know
slippery
how to do
slope.
it. You're so right.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah, and
given permission, but they're not given an effective strategy and the skills to know what to bring and when. And then it's a version of who's got the monkey.
well, yeah, it's that. And then, when we are constantly in the sort of mode of having to handle other people's very difficult experiences and negative emotions, it can be detrimental to the person who's on the receiving end if they do not have the skills to sort of detach themselves emotionally from that. So if you think about doctors and therapists and people who are in that line of work, they've been trained to like, how do you sit with that or look at that all day long, but really protect yourself so that you can continue to do your job well. And so they learn a technique called compassionate detachment. And this is a technique that I believe all leaders need to understand today, because they are handling a lot more negative emotions in the workplace. Like they've always had to handle employee frustrations or disappointments or upset clients, but now there's this whole new realm that they're handling now too.
And there's no
And so
education.
yeah, I heard there's
Yeah.
there's
Little,
limited
limited.
and honestly, that was the whole goal behind this book, is acknowledging like the emotional demands on leaders are so much higher now. They haven't been necessarily equipped to manage all of the emotions that they need to handle to perform well. This is called emotional labor. And it includes their emotions as well as all the emotions in the organization. And they haven't necessarily been equipped with the training or the resources. And our book, really serves to fill that gap, so that leaders can both lead more successfully in today's like emotionally charged workplace, as well as sustain their well-being where there's not a big trade-off.
Yeah. We tell leaders, and we've been telling leaders now for many years, empathy, right?
Mm,
Lead with empathy, but
yeah,
to your exact point, we're not explaining how to do that safely for yourself
yeah.
as well, right? So
Well,
what does that
empathy
look
can
like?
be
Empathy, we're going to take
weaponized
it all on.
too.
Yeah.
Empathy can be weaponized, and everybody's so busy showing they're empathetic that nobody's really getting to what we need to have a conversation on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
I think the other thing that's super important for people to understand, and like leaders are my whole mission, because I know the effect that high quality leadership can have on a workplace. And um, so I know like if we can all help leaders, then everybody wins. But the really important thing for people to understand, especially leaders, is that there's different kinds of empathy. There's emotional empathy where we really feel what others are feeling. There's cognitive empathy where we step into somebody's shoes, we see the world through their eyes, we understand their perspective. And then there's kind of compassionate empathy or empathic concern, which is we take action that is compassionate to help somebody with their struggles. Where we can get into trouble is if we lean too hard into emotional empathy,
yeah.
right? Where we're really feeling it, because then we're absorbing all of those emotions. The way that being more sort of that compassionate detachment technique works is by leaning more into the cognitive empathy, right? And there you're really information seeking. If we go back down to the doctors, and we think about how they show up, yes, there's a compassionate sense to them, but they are asking questions to better understand what's the situation here, what is going on, so that they can help you, right? They're not in there like feeling all your pain, right? And so leaders too can lead super effectively if they come in with a more cognitive approach to really understand what's going on here. What does this person need? How can I help? And then providing those kinds of supports as opposed to feeling it all. And so we can be very empathetic without absorbing.
Yeah. Those
Mm-hmm.
distinctions are really helpful.
Yeah.
Because like anything in the corporate world, it becomes a buzzword, but if we're not supported in how
Mm-hmm.
to do it and we don't make those distinctions, then we just get tired of this whole empathy thing because we really haven't understood how it fits toward working better together and being better.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
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 I've often used the phrase or sentence, start with love and seek to understand. But I like start with compassion and seek to understand better, because that creates, well, I guess a boundary a little bit. It implies a little bit more of a boundary. And so boundaries, I mean, that's both from what we're discussing here, as well as just this American culture we have around busyness is commended, and the need for boundaries. Talk a little bit about boundaries, about a technique towards boundaries, and sort of combating that stigma of both, showing up appropriately at the right levels from a compassion perspective, but then also combating the busyness that we're, so encouraged towards.
Yeah. I think where I would start is just that we didn't need to set so many boundaries in the past, right? Because we didn't have virtual communication. We didn't have little computers in our back pocket. And we didn't all have home offices, right? There were some very clear location and temporal boundaries that helped us balance more naturally, right? We'd go to work, we'd come home.
Desktop computer. Can't get to it when you leave, right?
Yeah. And so it was easier to preserve our
3 days for the letter, the poison pen letter from your boss took 3 days to get to you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And they're gone. They're so gone. And now the onus is completely on us to set those boundaries. And, technology, for all of its wonders, is super invasive, right? Like, so even that, you need to shut down, you need to shut off the notifications, right? There's so much we need to do to preserve our ability to focus, to be present, and to have the parts of life that that really feed us in other ways than work. And work is really important for most of us, but so are other things. And so, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Well, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. Go.
No, please.
Well, I was just tying it back to what we opened. It's all related, which I'm not surprised, which is recovery includes being more intentional with technology. So, for example, with your passion, there's no temptation to check text while you would be dead.
Please don't check a text while you're on a horse.
And so some people might have that kind of thing. But for me, especially at night, if it's something like reading philosophy, I have to turn the phone off because I have ADHD, but now we have cultural ADHD, and these machines are driving us as much as we're driving them. This constant connectivity makes it impossible to recover. And so whatever fits you in the description that you mentioned, that's horsebacking for you, but for something else. It has to include recognizing the habitual distractions that we can blame the boss, or we can say, oh, she won't stop texting me. But we often haven't said, I need a fast from this. Or Sabbath means rest, and it doesn't include cell phones.
Right.
Even an hour.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I'm super rigorous about shutting down notifications, having my phone out of my line of sight when I'm either working with a client or trying to write an article or a book or whatever, because those interruptions, those small interruptions, they absolutely shatter your attention, not in the moment, but for many minutes after. There's research that shows that if you're in sort of a deep work state, call it working on corporate strategy or a new marketing campaign or whatever it is, and you are then interrupted, whether it's because a text rings or Slack goes bing on you, whatever it is, it takes 23 minutes to get back.
You can't just toggle back.
Wow.
Yeah. And to me, that is, I I can't abide that. I cannot. And so one of the things that I'm oftentimes working with my clients on, and these are very senior leaders with huge remits, is carving out these periods for deeper work where
Yeah.
all the notifications are shut off. It is broadly communicated that barring a serious emergency, this is work time, right? And that can be signaled and protected in a variety of different ways. But most of the time, the biggest battle is ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of reasons why, despite setting time on our calendar to do strategic work, we'll make exceptions. And some of those exceptions, we have to make, but others, they arise because of assumptions we're making, or we haven't set strong enough boundaries, or there's, it's not getting communicated, on and
Yeah.
on and on and
Yeah,
on.
that last one is important because you might have done a good job with it, but not communicated it to me. And I'm violating, too strong a word, what you need. But just based, I had no awareness she was doing that. So
Yeah,
you would, if you communicate it well, most people will try to cooperate with your rhythm, not perfectly, but better. And many people don't do that, don't
right.
even communicate it.
Yeah. And honestly, I due to sort of just all of the stress um in this world, and I believe that most of us are operating with like a little too much cortisol in our systems, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that naturally makes you more reactive. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is harder to ignore those temptations that come, when you're trying to do deep focused work, because you're in this more reactive fight or flight state. And this is why, again, full circle,
Full
it
circle.
takes us back to why it is so important to take these breaks from work, short and extended, so that you can get your system kind of back to baseline, and remove some of the reactivity that just contributes to this overall stress spiral that most of us are in.
And for the top level leaders
Yeah.
to demonstrate those techniques, right? Like
Yeah.
when my doors close, my doors close. And for a lot of us, our work styles are where we're more open to interruption, which
Mhm.
so now that becomes sort of conflicting. Well, I know she doesn't mind if I just pop over, but then you can get derailed by that, right? Which that's a new learning for me. It takes to like now I'm going to say, is this worth me losing 30 minutes? I've only got 17, right?
Yeah,
Is the interruption worth me losing 30 minutes?
it's
I
not.
don't have 30 minutes, right?
Right.
So unless you're bringing your arm to me to be sewn back on, like
Yeah. Yeah, I think
that's
one
me
of
speaking to
the
my
things,
kids.
right, one of the things that can be helpful, I find it helpful, many of my clients have found it helpful, is to think about things on a scale, 0 to
Hmm.
10. 10, somebody's about to die, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a grave, grave situation. 0 is like, doesn't matter at all, right? Like most things are not above an 8. They're just not.
Hmm.
Um, but
It's finding that discernment, I think, to make those like, and it gets back to kind of what your own values, what matters most to you, right? A phone call coming in when you're in the middle of that, if you haven't silenced your phone, but that person is a dear loved one, do you answer?
yeah,
Right? It's tricky. I mean, they're tricky, kind of quick decisions that we have to make, but I don't know if there's a way to do this on your phone where you can have kind of the out of office text message return, right? To say
mm,
like, I'm really in focus time here. Call me if you really need to get to me right now, because there
mhm.
feels like such an expectation that you're answering right away.
You know what? I honestly, even being able to see your phone shatters your attention.
Yeah.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I like put mine away so I cannot see it. And I always just go back to, y- there were emergencies back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And, but there wasn't a phone finding us immediately.
And somehow we got to the hospital, or we got where we needed to go. It's
Yeah,
hard to believe that ever happened, but it's so true.
it's so true. And so I don't know. I'm pretty far out on the continuum here, because I just feel, well, it kind of goes back to that life is really short. I think we all want to do meaningful work, right? And 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 to get the most out of your time, it's really important that you protect it, right? Or you will not move the needle in the ways that you could. You'll waste a lot of time. And as far as I can tell, right, like we've each got one life. So it gets pretty existential for me.
Yeah. Well, we'll repeat the headline. Recovery is essential for high-performing individual teams and organizations. And if it's essential, we call on everybody to do some deep thinking on what that means to them, and certainly to get your book so they don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's easy.
No,
I'm not saying it's easy. Like
takes
there are a lot
intention and practice
practice. Yeah. There are just like a lot of
And
headwinds.
be brave.
And be brave.
courage.
And check your assumptions, right? We don't often do that, but you may be sort of in the background, you may have assumptions that are lurking that get in the way of your ability to sort of draw those boundaries, right? Like my team won't be able to do this without me. I'll look like I don't care, right? Like, I mean, you could go on and on and on about the possible like soundtrack. And it's just important to check that and say, is that really true?
Yeah. Well, tell us one more time about your upcoming book as we come to a close here. Give us all the deets.
The deets. So again, it's called Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. I co-authored it with Dr. Alicia Grandy. She's the head of the org psych department at Penn State. And she's actually an old friend from my PhD program. And what it really does is it marries the science with leaders' real everyday kinds of challenges, equipping them with evidence-based strategies and tools for really navigating all of the emotional demands that they face in a given day, in a week, in a month, in a quarter. So, the demands on leaders have really skyrocketed. The resource and the training has not caught up yet, and this book is there to help, right? So that's it, and it comes out on February 18th. So it hasn't hit
Wonderful.
yet,
Gosh,
but it
that's
is
exciting.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
But it's available for pre-order. So
Great.
yes.
Well, it sounds
so much.
super valuable and a topic that is needs to be covered. So thank you for you and your co-author for putting all the work into putting that together to give to the world.
Yeah,
Labor of love.
our
Thank
pleasure.
you for joining us so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.